people interested in exploring along those fronts? You mind just saying something about that?
Yeah, well, so I guess
I just briefly said, even when I was asking a question, try to get a sense of where Singapore is at in terms of mapping out the space of career trajectory paths. So we had a discussion at the break where we identified that actually this idea that the paths are not always from bottom to top, but sometimes people have to make strategic lateral moves in order to create opportunities that are feasible for them, and that nobody has really mapped out these spaces. But there are ways in which it sounds to me like Singapore is ahead of the United States just in terms of being aware already, or at least having a formal skill model in place and having associated that with jobs. It's less formalized in the US. I think with the data that's being collected here, there can be great opportunities to try to learn about new potential paths that could be both attractive to learners and also feasible in terms of creating the opportunities for the instruction that would be needed. So I'm really excited about the opportunity to try to partner with people here to make that happen. I think we're just starting to talk about ideas along those lines.
I think one of the advantages too is that you have opportunities to follow people theoretically because it's a small country. Follow people longitudinally as more than we had before. As the funding for higher education goes not just through master's and PhD programs, but through lifelong learning, and that how the universities
and also the screen.
play a role in we're really talking about citizens in Singapore really engaged in
I'm not typing that fast.
There's more of a concept of that versus you finish college and then you're off on your own. So there's opportunities now to follow people, how they stay educated, how they are involved in education throughout their careers, how they learn as adults in the workplace, get insights on that as well. And then as we talked just briefly just in terms of the workforce, is how people, when they are thinking about their first job, and then how they look at training in their current job and potential moves to that, might involve some very, very different types of
we have the recording, maybe we can just write it later. We write it later after, as we record everything.
Yeah. I think that will work.
Yeah, I enjoyed it very much. Although I'm also working on the computer, and I do have a couple of comments on Carrie was talking about. I think Singapore is, I can tell, it's very well managed, small country. A lot of very, very forward thinking happening. And it just happened that in the US, one of this military and government. And they, from the perspective of government or military, they actually also thinking forward, just like you guys. But they do have a little different approach. They have like an architecture. For example, in the US military, you can search, you have something called a total learning architecture. They're considering every single one of those enlisted soldiers, and from the time they get on to that system until they just retire and be a civilian, they actually have like they first have something called the PLA, Personal Assistant of Learning, and then now they have something called Total Learning Architecture. They actually have a theory-driven kind of like a career plan, but they associate technology with APIs with everything that you can do. If you have a structured instructions from the universities, or unstructured trainings, others, right? That would be something that would benefit you to consider that kind of holistic approach. Right now, technology is very cheap. Actually, it should be adding something right there. Now, what is the contribution of what you have towards a total learning architecture? So something like that would be worthy of starting from here.
I'd poll you again on what you think ALSET should be looking at. One of the concerns that the provost had very early on in setting up ALSET is to try to make high impact research that cannot be operationalized on the side of Singapore. In particular, there's a lot of interest locally about what makes Asian learners different culturally, or whether those aspects could be studied in situ or not, and if you could operationalize that in a cross-cultural study setting, or using a control group. So I wanted to ask our panel and distinguished guests whether how would you want to study this type of question, and what type of study design would it require? And this is a very broad question.
I know it's a tough question, but I think we're not in the on stage delivering a book, we're in this sort of brainstorming stage, so it'd be great to get what people think.
Right, I mean, that thought crossed my mind as well in terms of the culture, the extent to which we are also talking about changing career pathways and the inclination, cultural inclination to change that or not, and the extent to which the profession is provided to actually some other current entity as well. And then I definitely think that when we've done through cross-cultural studies, the question really becomes whether we can really do it then we'll think quantitative way, or it'll be more beneficially as a kind of observational and qualitative type of studies, where you're kind of trying to identify certain components of people who are trying to understand their kind of inclinations and career pathways and the kind of barriers that they see for career changes or not, and the ways how they are see the ways how that should be still on. Perhaps some of you are I don't know, but I think that would be really the first most natural kind of step. Once you understood that, I think there are plenty of these types of things that also are really beautiful about presentation talking about, even just the kind of social influences for people to find jobs. I think when you go back to social metric analysis, some of these really first works by Grandmeter and others that were talking about social networks, they were grounded in the studies that were based on finding jobs, right? They were studying Italian communities and kind of ghettos and the extent to which some of these strong ties in the community limited or constrained people's opportunities to find jobs. And I think some of these types of early studies can also be quite interesting for the ways how we can potentially think about changing professions and the extent to which we are open to different ideas. And then if you are talking then further on in terms of changing or something, interventions can also be to the extent to which exposure to different career pathways and creating these kind of weak time opportunities for people to think about future opportunities for their careers.
Maybe a slightly different start on this question. You could, I think it's almost a scientist, the cross-cultural researcher's job is what's different. But some other researchers are like cognitive science and interested in what's similar. I think the practical question might be, what do we think might work really well here that we should start testing out? And we're probably going to find, as we almost always do, actually it doesn't work quite as well as we thought. Here's a new innovation we need to make it work better. So maybe one of the start of that question is, what should the NUS really think? There's research that suggests this kind of intervention, this kind of age, this kind of outreach is good. And what do we think would actually work really well here? And especially gel with the kind of differences we've seen. I mean, I'll broad, but other people might comment as well what differences are. But one difference is there's very little attrition there. people would be extremely hard, but then there's a bit less independent work. There's less project work in the US. A lot of students come out of high school where you haven't been to the mall yet, but when you go to the mall in Singapore, in expensive mall space, there are centers where parents pay to bring their children to after school lessons. That's like a huge cultural difference. So they've got huge advantages in that sense. What it means is when they leave high school to the secondary school to a university, there's actually not a lot of independent project planning and self-management. Just throwing out some differences. I think people here know more than I do.
So on that note, today one of my takeaways was, or what has stimulated my thinking is that there's a lot of, I'm hearing a lot and very exciting work in terms of appropriating technologies for learning and teaching. And obviously, I think it bears really great intentions, to innovate teaching and learning. But what hasn't really come out as strongly, so innovations in the technologies, the learning technologies, innovations in the methods for understanding, measuring, and formatively providing dynamic feedback. I'm hearing a lot of that exciting work. But the learning outcomes, I feel, haven't yet been discussed very much today or been equally privileged. And it seems that a lot of these are to replicate, perhaps, or reflect more pedagogies that we're more familiar with for conceptual learning or disciplinary mastery, which is important. And Singapore is well known for good achievement in disciplinary mastery. So at least in K-12, and I know that as a Singapore long-term strategy in terms of human development or talent development, the notion of 21st century skills or productive, adaptive dispositions, whatever umbrella term you want to use it, creativity, innovation, critical thinking, communication, collaboration. These as learning outcomes, I'm wondering where we move forward and if there's a resonance in applying the techniques, the modeling, the technology, the analytics to think about some of these outcomes and some of the pedagogies that might, or design learning environment, back to Dragon's point that it's about learning theory and learning design, and at its crux, learning analytics. How do we foster this and what are we thinking about? What's the driving pedagogy? What's the driving learning outcome? And these are dispositions that are famously, notoriously difficult to measure. And achievement is easy as compared to this disposition. So it would be excellent and awesome to kind of foster new ways of looking and measuring and supporting and scaffolding the development of these dispositions.
To add to Jen's question and comment really, because you hear about Singapore's development through the Skills Future program, which is very discipline specific, and there's the skills training, and sort of to me pushing more specialization down. So you already can think of the university as filtering the knowledge into so many detailed segments, and I think for even the success of our field in learning analytics and educational technology and learning sciences is very integrated, right? And we've already pointed out today, our program is heavily centered on the technology portion that's intentional with the school community, but it's also ignoring a lot of the facts on neuroscience and other aspects of pedagogy that need to be part of that strategy. So I think this is also a question then, how do we train people to do that type of work? I mean, we also suggested earlier to the WPA folks that, it could be from somebody from technology like yourself, going into Carolyn's group to learn discourse theory, analytics, discourse analysis. But, in all ways, we're specialists in our own area. How do we train people to take up the greater cause of educational technology, learning analytics, all the facets that can be in, especially in a continuing education format, right? If you think about a program like Skills Future, which is you get a micro or nano degree in a certain area, how does that help you really to have an integrated, holistic view of knowledge?
just carry a little bit further with both your comments. When you're getting at some of the knowledge, as you said, is easy to get at to assess. It's hard to assess some of the skills. These nano degrees don't get at skills. Skills get developed over time. In the medical education, we have to follow things like clinical thinking. It's not you take a course and all of a sudden you think clinically, but it develops over long periods of time. The traditional structure of an undergraduate education, though, is a discrete set of courses that you put together, and all of a sudden you have a degree. But it works well for content, but it doesn't work well for the development of skills. So, and skills have to be measured in, there's not an easy one multiple choice question to get at a scale. You probably need multiple ways of looking at that scale and triangulate to really understand it. At least that's what we've done in medical education. So that requires a structure that currently, as I said, is not a part of the undergraduate. Maybe that's an area that learning sort of technology and analytics has maybe a chance to bring all together for students.
I asked quite a question to John based on what Bob said earlier. So in your talk, you mentioned you need several observations to form a learning curve, right? And most of those times, those learning curves are within a particular class. Is that right? Within a particular defined module or class? Or are there cases of which you see this happening over cohorts of time, or the same instructor looking at the same set of students a year after they've taken the course with the instructor, or after they've graduated? Has any of those types of studies happened in Data Shop and WESST?
In Data Shop, most of the data sets are within a unit in a course, although there are some year-long data sets that do go farther. The algorithms we use for prediction and creating learning curves do not take into account forgetting, although there have been some proposed. One of Schindler's colleagues, Pavlik, has a model, a regression model that he does that does that forgetting and uses that longer time period. So it is possible to do that, and it would be something exciting to do. But again, it comes down to collecting the data. I think even going back to the beginning of this discussion, Bob was saying we have this opportunity to follow people through their careers, and what does that mean from a data sense as well? How do we follow someone, and how do we track? Are they progressing? It's not an easy problem. Definitely one that has plenty of research opportunities.
Actually, on that note, can I just ask, Chris, looking at the data, and are there plans currently are there plans currently or conversations with other IHR counterparts, like the equivalent in NLP or NTU? Because to get a systems map in Singapore is both easy and difficult, right? To get that systems corpus of data, but it requires that real network partnership between IHLs to track our cohort of students, whether they come to advance or NTU, or then as a new, and then as they go into the workforces. And we're setting up systems, sort of, data.
I think we're very open to that. I'll tell you right now, our focus has been one on just getting our arms around all the data that's already flowing in the U.S. It could arguably be increasing and growing faster than we're getting our arms around it. After that, we've been looking at the literature and some of the leading conferences and trying to figure out what are the right types of data to be capturing. So a lot of data may come back from even just different online tools as pass-fail, rather than incremental information like number of attempts, everything you need to create those type of learning curves. So we're trying to figure out the right additional data we should need. There's also the multimodal data, right? Should we be capturing things on, with cameras and sound and audio and that? I would say branching out of just looking at the theory of where NUS is, we're also talking to MOE and looking at how to things we discovered that we want to push back into K-12. A lot of the grant applications will lead us to partner with secondary schools and JCs, less to the college, so therefore we have to architect things, both the systems and the type of data we're going to capture and here in PDP, so that we could personal data protection contacts, so that we could go back into K-12. And then after all of that, we have to keep an eye on where we're going with lifelong learning and what are going to be the requirements there for how you assess students, because some of the examinations might need to be a lot more detailed. We will rely maybe a little bit more on the system and a little less on faculty as we will do at the undergrad level. So I think that's points in yet another direction. Then after that, I think as we start forming collaborators that are outside of the US, that will lead us to the next potential layer of interests, like what does a particular researcher at SUSS or NTU or over at NIE, how do their requirements differ from those? But I think there'll be a lot of commonality around trying to serve the needs of MOE and serve the needs of lifelong learners. And so I imagine that's what we're at.
One of the things that in US is working on is on the student experience study, and one part that we are looking at is how do students form these social networks on campus. It's something, so that's something that we're doing in situ study or an observation study. So that's something maybe I'm thinking we can take it further to see, particularly what Prashant was talking about, how do these social networks go beyond campus? How does it come into the campus? So because some of the things when we talk about, they are talking about, this has been my group since primary school days. And there are groups that are saying, oh, it's just because I'm working on a project and that's why we have formed this group and so on. So that's something maybe we can think about, what kind of analysis should we be doing and how can we take this forward, and can we help students do better in that sense, forming teamwork, doing project work, and so on. And again, bringing in the extracurricular activities as well, because sometimes they're talking about it's just because I'm in the sports and I formed this kind of network, and that's helping me, and so on, the peer effect. So that's something very interesting that we might want to look at, particularly with the university town, where students are already grouped to be working in teams, to be working within their residential colleges. Is that something that we can bring it back into the actual university courses itself? So that's something that we can do.
It's slightly different, but just a comment because I was here, I guess, in the morning and saw different presentations from the school community faculty and all the interesting projects that they do when they're bored or when they do as an interest, a passion. And I think they mentioned that they have no time to analyze. So, but I think it's something that, in terms of ALSET and even the team, that's something that, they have data and they want to, they're interested in this area. So I thought these are areas that can be further expanded on because they build upon existing work. It's easier to start from somewhere than start from scratch. Yeah, so I thought, and then thinking of how this can be related to the bigger data structures that that school computing and the NUS has. I think that would be an important thing because I think there are micro projects and then there's a large institutional level project that each has its own there are different levels of analysis as well as they each bring about different values. So I think they're all important. So it's just how we are linking it together and seeing a greater picture of the contribution, the values of all of this. Yeah. So I'm from NIE and also Office of Education Research. And we actually have a lot of research to just anybody can do everything. So that's why our research is quite messy. But I think along the years, I think it's important to have focus areas, priority areas, which are going forward towards having priority areas. So I think it's good to brainstorm, but eventually you have to decide which are the key areas. Yeah.
Maybe one other that I want to add is something with the IDLE data that we already have. is one that we can think about is on the assessment data. We have massive amounts of data where students have done assessments and we have all that data. So something to move towards adaptive assessments where we can dive in towards deeper learning rather than to just take it for a grade or something. So if we think about guiding that process to have adaptive assessments or even adaptive tutorials in that sense. So I'm not sure if you've heard about this. There was one proposal that came about from Ryan Reynolds from chemistry, who was thinking about looking into this sort of developing a system and analyzing adaptive assessments. Something to think about.
So I know in the school of computing faculty, Ahmed, who presented today on TV, was very interested on doing that type of work, converting to a very low stakes continual assessments. We do away with final exams, but I may have relayed this to some of you socially, but in the Singapore context, whenever you give more assessments, people get more stressed out, right? So it's not that you replace high stakes final exam with many low stakes, it's just it raises the bar, and then suddenly the other types of activities that students would normally do get marginalized. I think Singaporeans are notorious for putting a lot of time into studies and maybe at the cost of physical well-being, either sleep or exercise or eating, all different things considered. When it comes, I think it comes back to the point that Elizabeth was alluding to about having a solution, having a problem. We have people with data or have data and say, I don't have time to deal with that data. That's great. We have a solution. We have solution providers that have a tool algorithm. And you think by just matchmaking together that might work, but I'm not quite sure that's the case. I think we always still need a champion. Somebody is going to say, yeah, that's great, you have the data, that's great, you have a solution. I am going to drive it all the way through. Because when you have a solution provider who doesn't care about the data, or you have a data provider who doesn't care about the solution, then something goes wrong. Something in between comes out, you get research that doesn't mean anything, or you get a solution that doesn't scale. I think that I'm quite worried about that fact. And that relates back to my earlier comment about, how do we find and train such champions? If I'm going to train data scientists, just care about algorithms and data, we don't care whether they're in corpus linguistics, we don't care whether they're analyzing multimodal data, we don't care whether they're looking at assessment data, we don't understand the nuances of it, then somehow it doesn't reach the right audience. We're publishing for the sake of data analytics without knowing what impact it makes on, well, the people producing that data, right? And conversely, if you're somebody producing the data, you have learners, but you're not aware of the techniques involved, and could apply, the push button solutions, right? That's what I said earlier. You have these nice dashboards, you just provide them, and then people don't know what to make of them, and then go home with the solution provider satisfied. The learner has no idea what's going on, and no one's for wiser, and we're all a lot poorer after spending so much research money. I'm wondering, getting back to the earlier comment, how do we find, or how do we train these types of experts that are going to pick up this this gauntlet to do the research or to marry both sides of the equation?
David has been telling about this in many forums that he has the data, can someone work on it, but there's not that match really to move forward.
I think that's the research part of its own, right?
Yeah.
You have to have these successful platforms work.
Yeah.
So a question along you, we have champions here, institutions that we can train them because a school or faculty that has faculty with many expertise, and definitely ALSET is trying to provide that environment here. Do you have suggestions of how we go about it? We have tried to recruit Joseph, as well as Patricia Chen, who's in psychology. We're trying to get people from WESST who do the neuroscience aspect. But what makes them work together well?
I think it will have the same answer. Well, I think everybody who's ever worked in an interdisciplinary group knows that there are big challenges. I think even if you have a really good attitude going in, which isn't always universally the case, but even if you do have that, the fact is that it's very difficult to appreciate the expertise that the other person brings. And so even if you have great intentions and you work really hard to make it work, oftentimes it just breaks down because it requires so much effort to get to a place where you have a shared vision that substantially draws on the foundation that you both bring. And the only times I've ever seen it work well were because there was a really strong financial incentive to make it work. And I know that sounds really cynical, but it's true because otherwise it takes so much longer and it's very risky. You may not find that sweet spot that substantially draws from both people's expertise and actually contributes back to both. That means that both of you are taking risk when you do it. It's very hard for people like Joseph early in his career trajectory here now. Is he going to take that risk and then possibly not make it? I mean, it depends on how conservative one wants to be, right? So, but I'm a firm believer in interdisciplinary work, and I put myself continually in that situation, and yet I feel sometimes like after I've been slapped so many times from both sides, why do I do this to myself? And yet I keep doing it. So, but anyway.
To follow up though, I was on the same page, and I think we were both taking that money thing, but to say, kind of push back, money isn't always the answer, and there's a lot of wasted money when you try to do that collaboration. I think Carolyn did mention it at the very start, the shared vision is super important. So, and I think you guys are doing that and starting to flesh out this vision that you have, and I think that's critical, and to get the buy-in of the people who are going to do that. The Pittsburgh Science Learning Center was very successful in having a vision and bringing people together, interdisciplinary ways to work together with small seed money that actually blossomed into much larger money for these specific areas. There were also other centers funded that had a different model where they kind of just got the money from different separate ways, and that model wasn't successful. So it's a hard problem, but yeah, there have been incentives. Instead of just money, I would say incentives to get the people to work together is what really manage their vision.
If I could just kind of comment on that, I guess because you can see I do very interdisciplinary research, right? But I guess at least what I wanted to look about is especially because I'm not going to take big risks right now. That's what Carolyn and John have to get tenure and all the guys to do. I do every time I do interdisciplinary research, I'm thinking, how is this actually going to be incentive compatible for us? And not like 5 years, not for our souls, not because I like working with people in disciplines. How's it actually going to make it better? And so one thing I found is that practical goals really help with this. I used to have a lot of arguments when I was a 30th PhD between a psych and education person. And these arguments wouldn't disappear, but they get much simpler when it was like, how are we going to improve students' learning of math in this great topic? Then we have good arguments. How should we measure learning? Those are productive. So at least I find, and Bob has made a big push, this is what I find very attractive, but ALSET. What's your practical problem solving? And then all of a sudden, disciplines can start to move towards that. The other thing I found is that it's not to, again, find, okay, here's some people in our department, let's collaborate across disciplines. It's actually to say, I think these kinds of things might be useful, but they're probably not all going to be. Let's tackle the problem, and once it comes, it's going to come, and who doesn't, it doesn't. So, and to give one example of this, I see a big part of report as randomized experiments. And that's also from experience, not just because I was a psychologist, I like that. Because when we start designing experiments, like how do we enhance motivation, some people are not going to be interested, This neuroscience doesn't care about that topic, or this psychologist cares more about just cognitive factors. And that's fine. We don't have to do it together, but we at least see the problem and then we can coalesce. And then I feel like randomized experiments are really good because on the one hand, they're really simple, everyone gets them, but you can do an experiment with anything. So you can bring in the practical people who teach it. You can bring in the psychologists who normally think about lab studies. You not thought they would. But they can think about, different comparisons and different measures. And then you bring the data science and machine learning people, and they're then forced to say not just what's relationship, how we improve it. But that's my take on it. How to see why that's not right.
No, I don't disagree with you. In fact, I totally agree with you that it's much simpler when you have a very focused, practical problem to work on together. But I think actually that's part of the crux of the problem. That oftentimes when you put two disciplines together, the thing that is the obvious thing that they can do together is a practical thing, and yet it's not valued from either side, and because you're not making a theoretical contribution to either field. And so that it depends on how you view it. So do you value a practical outcome? You solve a practical problem. If you value it, then that's a great thing. Otherwise, you can look at it and say, oh, well, this is just another case of research that fell through the cracks. They tried to be interdisciplinary and ended up doing something that was, quote unquote, just applied, But I do get the sense that actually applied practical research here is valued, which I think is a good thing. And maybe that is what's going to make it work here.
Okay, so I think this is a good venue to bring up this particular question. It's not particularly related to learning analytics, but definitely related to education. So one of the main objectives of MOOCs when it was started was to reach everyone, right? I think these days we are actually diverging away from this particular point, right? Recently, paper published science from Renee and Global Achievement Gaps, right? That clearly shows that there are achievement gaps between demographics and countries in how they are using the same platform to learn. Okay. And what is there are policymakers here, there are people from NIA, they can also contribute to this discussion to the point. What is the role of learning analytics researchers and government folks in helping online education or education in general to reach everyone? Right? So this particularly bothers me because I come from India, where the differences in wage gap as well as differences in the quality of education and certain topics in education that can be taught to people are driven by how much money you have. For example, I don't know whether people in Singapore realize this or not. The people who learn deep learning in India these days probably are the rich kids. Okay, and a lot of people who are in universities probably aren't even aware of Coursera edits. Okay, and these rich kids are actually going, unlike in the United States, in India, most of the people who are taking books are students, not professional education at all. They take this primer course on Coursera, then try to get graduate school, something like CMU, pay $40,000 US per annum, do an MS, and then try to get to Silicon Valley to Google. This is the process that's driving people to Google. And then after 5 years, we do some survey in Silicon Valley and we find out, oh, everybody in Silicon Valley is actually rich. Of course they will be rich. The process that was driving them there was this, and we did nothing when this was happening, right? So what is our responsibility? I mean, who is responsible? I mean, can science do anything to address this? Because the people who started this MOOC revolution were scientists, and they thought that it was an important endeavor, and we don't seem to be progressing in that direction.
So I actually liked one of the talks yesterday in the tutorial. We talked about the fact that you can't have it both ways. You can't feel that AI is coming to take away the job of teachers, and at the same time be very cynical that we're not like lowering the price of things. Right? The answer is probably somewhere there. I have my John's slide today that there's going to be the very cheap and free, accessible. I've even seen this on some of the MOE grants, scalable, seem to be like the code word for not expensive, which is fine, just be very open, right? We're looking for something very open source, low cost. What is that, $1 per student, $5 per student? They won't quite give me the number, but that'd be great to know. And then the high touch, right? So we must value high touch, because at the same time, if the student's paying $40,000 per year, they don't maybe want to do a lot of online stuff. They're like, why am I paying you so much, right? So evidently there must be a feeling that the free online stuff is not the same quality as the high-touch instructor-led stuff. So I think even just from the pure computer science, cognitive tutor, make it better, make it more motivational, I think we have a long way to go to make what we deliver for free, highly scalable, anywhere near as good as sort of that one-on-one teacher experience or that 20-on-1 teacher experience. So I do think there are a lot of people, so I don't think it's going to be an either or. I think the online free stuff should just keep getting better as we have more data, as we have better, multimedia, better resources. I'm almost worried about the other part. How are we going to make sure that the expensive 20-to-1, 40-to-1 teacher experience, how is that going to continue to get better, right? And we have similar research going on in Singapore, which is really around sort of teacher moves. How do you let the data that's accumulating during the class or leading into a class influence the actions that a teacher takes during the class, right? What's the dashboard you give the teacher, right? So like I used to teach one course where I had one section that I taught 12 to 3, and right after that another section like 3:30 to 7. And honestly, I knew one class was a little bit quicker and a little faster than the other, but I didn't react on the fly probably as well as I could have if I had better data, better information, better flowing, right? So I'm hoping you see it both places. The online, low touch, free, keeps getting better and better, closing on the teacher experience. And then the teachers who worked really well off of intuition for hundreds of years start to, in addition to doing, intuition, maybe get a little bit more data back, better tools as well. Because I know for me, I can work really well in intuition at about a 5-to-1 student ratio. And once it gets to 10 to 20-to-1, I'm probably guessing. I'm looking at 1 or 2 bases, I'm basing it on past experience, and there's probably a lot of ways that the tools could help you do an even better job at a 40 or a 100-to-1 like student ratio.
All right, so, okay, with that, I think we're going to adjourn for today. Thank you all for coming to today's session, and tomorrow we'll start again at 9 o'clock, I think. Yeah, the first invited speaker for that thing, which is Carolyn. So, Matt, let's close the session. Thank you very much for coming.